And then I've learned a lot about tenant selection. Tenant selection, my God, it's so important. I think because I learned those lessons, things are going much smoother. You know what I mean? Like I legitimately enjoy dealing with these people. I like talking with them. I see them calling me and I'm not like, oh boy, what is it this time? You know what I mean?
Joining us today is Mr. Mitch Binding. Mitch, could you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, how you got started in real estate, and your journey to this point?
Yeah, sure. And first of all, thanks for having me back again. I've been a fan of the podcast for a while, so it's nice to be here. And our second attempt at trying this, so hopefully this one works. But
second attempt.
Yeah, so I'm Mitch Binding. I live here in Edmonton, same as you. I'm a helicopter pilot by trade, which keeps me very busy. Gone from home a lot, and when I'm home, I work a lot. I have a small family, wife and two very young kids, and a dog the size of a small horse. His name is Thomas. Yeah. What else? I think that's it. And now I'm a part-time real estate investor as well on the side. So keeps me busy. I'm very busy.
And how did that all start for you? The real estate journey. What did that look like?
So it was. I want to breeze past the cliche part, but I started the same way so many other people started. But I had a landlord I used to live with back when I was in flight training, and she was trying to convince me to read this book by Robert Kiyosaki, and I was just like not interested in it. It just wasn't interesting to me. So she gave me the book anyway, and it sat on my bookshelf for years. And then when we had our second kid last summer, I was just sitting at home, baby sitting on my chest, and I'm like just kind of reading through books because I had nothing else to do. And I finally got around to reading that book. And I was like, sure, I'll give it a go. And it was amazing. It changed my life. So yeah, because I had some time off with I took a little bit of parental leave. I read that book and I was like, okay, now's the time to do this. I'm either going to take what I got from this book and do something with it, or I'll move on to the next book and it'll fade in the rear view mirror and I'll move on with my life. And I was like, okay, I have a bit of time off. If I'm going to do it, I got to do it. So I committed to myself that with the rest of the time I had off, I was going to read as many books, listen to as many podcasts, meet other investors, and just learn as much as possible. And then my goal was just that by the end of my parental leave, I was going to be ready to jump in and buy a property if that's what I wanted to do. So I kind of gave myself a timeline. I was like, learn as much as possible, and then just pull the trigger if we're ready to do it. And then it took off pretty quickly, actually, because it was all I was focusing on, other than raising my 1-month-old baby, which takes a lot of time as well.
Oh yeah.
I just kind of started jumping in. I was, I think I was telling you this the other day, but I was just mowing my lawn, listening to a podcast, and the guest on there was James Canal, which through Mogul Realty, and he mentioned he was in Edmonton. I was like, oh hell yeah, I'm going to give that guy a call right now. So I just phoned him because he gave his phone number. I was like, hey James, this is Mitch. What's going on? I want to get into real estate. And he was like excited to hear from me. And he's like, unfortunately, I'm not in Edmonton anymore. I'm in Vancouver, but I'm going to hook you up with one of my realtors, Devin. And I went for coffee with him like within a couple of days. And then a couple of days after that, we were out on the beat, like looking at houses. And then a month later, we bought our first rental property. So it was, things went quick. And then I tried to maintain that speed. I didn't expect to buy a place so fast, but things lined up. And so we just kind of kept going and going and going. So I actually managed to buy 2 properties while I was on parental leave, which was awesome. So yeah. Anyway, I feel like that was a lot of information for just like, how did I get started?
No, I love that. It's in depth. Now tell me, firstly, the parental leave, I think the good thing is it gave you that laser focus, and you could achieve so much more from just having laser focus versus being like scatterbrained. But how long were you on parental leave for? Was it like 3 months, 6 months, a year? What did that look like? So
grand total, I took 9 months.
Nice.
Which was, it was very good. I did not take that with my first kid, and I was like, why didn't I take the whole thing? so my second one, I was like, I learned from it, and turns out at the time I didn't know I was going to use it to buy real estate. Turns out it was a lucky thing that I took all that time off, because it facilitated my journey into real estate. And really it was, the actual act of buying the first and second property wasn't, I mean, it doesn't take that long, right? It was all the learning. I wanted to commit as much time and energy as possible right out of the gate to learn everything I could, and in every means possible. So that was kind of like the big thing. Still not easy with like a 1 month old, but especially as she got a little older and started to get a bit of an opinion about things. It's hard
Yeah.
to read books, but it's fine. You find time, right? So
I can relate to that because I took advantage of that myself. For when my wife was pregnant with my daughter and my daughter was just about to be born, I took parental leave and I used that time to transition into getting my realtor's license, studying as much as I could, and I got it like within a couple of weeks. But
nice.
so I can relate that laser focus in like just parenting and just staying focused on what the goal is. But one thing that I find a lot of people get stuck in is the learning side. Is like you mentioned, want to learn as much as I can, try and learn everything, and people end up becoming professional learners and not taking any action. Learning is important, but it's just one piece of the puzzle. Oftentimes,
Mm-hmm.
people don't move on to the second piece, right? And I feel like you made that jump into learning and taking action very quickly. Now, I feel like the most important factor to that is the mindset shift. Now, one thing that I picked up that you mentioned was you said that you put a timeline. You put a timeline in place, but you didn't even stick to that timeline. You sort of jumped ahead. So,
Yeah.
what was it that sort of encouraged you and pushed you to just go ahead and start taking action, even though you more than likely didn't know everything that you needed to know?
Yeah, so there were a couple things. I mean, like you said, there's kind of learning and doing, but those are, you know, at a certain point, those become the same thing. You have to learn by doing. So I knew that at some point, and this was part of why I reached out to James in the first place, was I needed to get out of the reading books and listening to podcasts and like go start walking the walk a little bit. So a little bit of it was just that I knew that I had to push myself out of my comfort zone a little bit and just go start doing it, right? And so out of the beginning, that was mostly just like viewing properties and analyzing properties. Devin provided me with a pro forma, which was great. I found some online, but the one that he gave me was my favorite one. And I used that pro forma, and I analyzed like hundreds of houses, which was good. That took a lot of time. And the first couple of times, it took me like 10 minutes to analyze a house, right? But from things I had seen, people I had talked to, and even just experience in my career and other parts of my life, like you have to just practice it. It's muscle memory, right? So now,
Yeah.
like I was analyzing properties last night, and it takes like 30 seconds. If I even get to the pro forma, right, I'll look at it real quick and be like, yep, yes, no, fits my buy box, doesn't fit it. And then if I get to the pro forma, it takes like 30 seconds, right? So and I knew that. So I was just doing it. I was doing like 15 to 20 a night just to practice it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I knew that I had to do that. And then part of what pushed me to buying our first property in the first month was kind of just luck, I guess. We were out there looking at properties, and I'd go out with Devin, and we'd be looking at like 8 properties a day, and I would go out every weekend or whatever. If you're out there looking at properties, eventually you'll see one you like. And we found one that hit the bill. It was an up down legal suite and a separate garage that could also be rented. And I had determined through my own numbers that this was what I was looking for, just with interest rates and stuff like that. I was looking for something like that just to make a cash flow. And I found a place that was just checked all my boxes, and it was the right price. And we were able to talk them down to a more competitive price. And it was in an area I didn't know a lot about, but I liked the area. So it was kind of one of those things. It was just like, well, this opportunity fell into my lap. So are you serious or not? Well, I'm telling myself I'm serious. So just do it. So I wrote an offer, and which was like a big, kind of like stepping off the cliff kind of moment. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I definitely didn't feel like I knew as much as I wanted to at that point, but I acknowledged that I wasn't going to, right? Like if I waited till I knew everything,
That's it.
like you'll be waiting forever. So
Still be waiting. Exactly.
yeah, so I kind of walked up to the edge and looked, and I was like, hey, yeah, I think it's good. And so I took a step. So it was fine.
Let's jump.
And it was good. Yeah. And I learned a lot off of that first buy, which I knew I would. There are things I've learned since then that I would do differently, but there was nothing like there's nothing devastating. This is a thing about working with somebody who knows what they're talking about. Like I had a good realtor I was working with. I had a good mortgage broker I was working with, and I was going to meetups in town here, and I kind of ran it by other like investors I'd gone for coffee with, like, hey, this looks good to me. What do you think? I was like, oh yeah, it looks good. So I was like, okay, well, let's go. So that's kind of what pushed me into action.
You know, as you saying all of these things is like it's just checking boxes in my head, like ding ding ding. Literally, like it's honestly it's what I tell newer investors that I speak with all the time. Like this is the it's sort of the flow that you should follow, because sometimes I see them jumping around, and I feel like you hit the nail on the head with breaking down your progression. Because yes,
Nice.
you start with the learning, and then you link up with building your power team. And whether that starts with a mortgage broker, whether it starts with an investor focused realtor, you start building your power team. But then you need to start running numbers, because like you said, the deal fell into your lap, but that deal could have fallen into your lap before you started running numbers, and you would not have known if it was a good deal or not, right? The
Yeah.
only way you know that that's a good deal is because you've done the reps. You've run pro forma after pro forma after pro forma. And when I share that same pro forma with my investors, I tell them the pro forma is as detailed as it really needs to be. Now, everyone has their own level of like depth and detail that they want to go into when they analyze it. And I mean, to each their own, whatever you feel comfortable with. But I find that you can run the numbers on that pro forma really quick, really easy. And it covers all the details that you need, really. And when you first start off, yes, it's going to take you a little longer, but you could actually do it like in like a minute, 30 seconds, exactly like you said. And it's pretty easy to see how the property will perform with those numbers, and you get confident in those numbers. And if you run them a few times and you take another property and you run the numbers on that and something looks different, and you're like, well, wait, I've done everything the same. Something's different. This looks a whole lot nicer. It actually looks like it can cash flow, or you know what I mean? Like something's different. And that's how you start spotting the good deals. But outside of actually putting the reps in, you'll never have the true confidence to say that this is a great deal, right? So you put those reps in, you linked up and started building your power team. You put those reps in, and then you started doing showings. And I like the order that you did that in, by the way, as well, because I also find there's new investors that get excited to go view properties, and they don't even run their numbers before viewing the properties, not even rough numbers.
Right.
And what happens is you can get that buyer's fatigue as well, because now there's how many properties are there on the MLS? There's tons that you can go view, right? But when you run the numbers, you sort of funnel in out. Okay, well, these don't work. Let's not even consider viewing those. And then you funnel them down like, okay, let's go view these that could potentially work. And then when you view them, you see, you sort of dig in further, and then you can dial in a little deeper. But it increases or decreases your chance of getting buyer's fatigue, and increases your chance of actually having a deal fall into your lap. But you just did all the right steps, man. So I love the way you broke that down.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
And yeah, I know that, that feeling of putting in an offer, it's like jumping off the cliff. And then the nice thing is, it's if you have conditions on the offer, you're not sort of free falling from the sky. You actually have like a bungee rope attached to you. You can easily just be pulled up before you go splat and do your due diligence and see. So, but no, man, I love it. Honestly, the fact that you've shortened the time between starting your journey and learning about real estate investing and actually diving in it's truly impeccable. It's a lot of people get stuck in that. And you're right, there's an overlap between the reading, listening to podcasts and getting your education that way, and then actually doing it. And there is an overlap, but you
for
need
sure. And don't get me wrong, even when I took the step and started going and looking at properties and learning through doing, I never stopped reading or listening to podcasts. Like that continues, right? I still listen to my podcast. Yeah, I'm still listening to your podcast, and I have my favorite ones from all across Canada, and like one or two from the States, but I don't really listen to those quite as much anymore. But yeah, like I'm always trying to hear what other, and it's not so much in the beginning, it's like trying to get like a very strong familiarity with like baseline concepts, right? Like what is a BRRRR? How do you do a BRRRR? Those kind of things. Yeah. And then like these days, I 100% do not know like all of those foundations all the way through yet. I'm still always learning, but these days I'm tending to listen more for, as the market is constantly changing right now, what are people doing? What strategies are working? And like, do I need to adjust mine? I really like the idea of finding something that works, fine tuning your template, and then you just stamp that template onto everything, right? Like you find something that works, it's like,
Yes.
why would you change it again? So I have a template that works right now. I've done it twice. I'm kind of back on the market right now for my third one, and I'm finding it very easy to just take that template and apply it. But I'm still always questioning myself, like with the market and with, as CMHC comes out with new rules, or like, MLI Select, and, the, I'm really interested in the idea of doing infill new builds right now,
Yeah.
like purpose built rental multiplexes. I'm very interested in that. But that's in my mind much more complex than what I'm doing right now. So I have to again reapply myself to learn all of those basics again. And
Yeah.
so do I just keep doing the template I'm doing right now? Or is that not working as well as if I pivoted and tried something else? The the key is, I think, not to get shiny penny syndrome, because there are so many good strategies out there, and I'm cognizant that I might be looking at this very cool strategy over here and being like, oh, but I want to do that now. And like maybe I just need to check myself for a minute and be like, no, 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 keep doing what you're doing for a minute. It's working.
Yeah.
This is kind of where I'm always listening and reading now to try and make sure I'm happy with my course right now, if that makes sense.
Oh man, it absolutely makes sense. And that's a key thing that I left out there, was within that progression is you need to choose a strategy before you get started as well, because there's so many strategies. And I often get asked this question is, so what strategy works? Like they all
Yeah.
do it, right? And it's finding strategies that are more appealing or achievable in your location, in your market that you're looking to invest in, right? There's certain strategies that work better for your current market. There's certain strategies that work better in Edmonton versus in BC, Vancouver. You know what I mean? So it's getting to know your market, and by doing that, you don't need to go in depth and do research. You can link up with realtors, other professionals, other power team members, go to networking events, speak to people. But I like that you're contemplating that, and you're sort of cognizant of that, because yes, you have a strategy that works. You have this template that you've built on. You've built a base, a knowledge base. You know the systems around that strategy, and it's like, do I keep doing this versus do I learn this new strategy, which seems tempting? It's something that's on the rise right now, and it's a prime strategy. There's a lot of investors that are actively pursuing this infill strategy, and especially for our market that we're in. So I fully understand your whole contemplation on it both, and man, there's a lot of factors that you would have to internally, I guess, run through and sort of decide what works best for you, because there's no right or
For
wrong.
sure.
You could do either, right? And you could be successful at either. Well, obviously, with a MLI Select program, CMHC, there are some requirements. I guess people need to. I think the first step to that is speaking to a mortgage broker that can help you out on that, and to see if you qualify, based on equity and all those other factors. And then if that is an option, it could be something that you explore.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. I know it's not it's relevant because was it your last one with Zoria? And she talked about this quite a bit. And and it's interesting. Zoria is one of the ones that I've watched for a while. She was one of the first people in Edmonton that I went for coffee with when I decided to start getting into investing. I was like, wow, here's a person who's done it. You know what I mean? She's found quite a bit of success and is doing a good job. And I'm watching that, and I'm like, this is the kind of thing that I want to do. But people like Zoria make it look easy as well, right? Like, because she's very good. So I know there's so much to learn, and all the things that you guys talked about on the last one. Like you need to have a certain amount of like net worth and all that kind of stuff to get into it. So yeah, who knows, right? And honestly, something I've learned, like I don't know, an approach that has been suggested to me is just like on my next one, if I did decide to do something different like that, is just to like buy in as a junior partner on a deal that's doing that, right? And then just like be part of the process to like learn by doing, while still like being in the deal, right? You know what I mean? So I might do something like that. So who knows? But again, like I've been back at work now for like 6 months or something like that, 5 months, and it's very busy. I now certainly find it a lot harder to commit the time to doing everything that I did back in the beginning, because I mean I work like somewhere between like 9 and 12 hour days. And I mean, I'm gone for long periods of time. And when I'm home, I want to spend that time with my family, right?
Yeah.
Which is like not contradictorily, but like it's the reason I got into real estate was to one day be able to provide the time freedom that I can just spend it all with my family and do things that I want to do. So I have to balance. I really want to just go full tilt into this all the time, but if the purpose is to spend time with my family, I need to make sure I'm still spending with time with my family right now, right? So it's
Yeah.
definitely a juggling act for me to make sure I have time to do these things. So I mean, at the moment, the I mentioned earlier that I'm looking for my third property. I'm probably just going to do the template onto the third property thing, as I mentioned, because that's not that that's easy. It still requires conscious thought and effort, and you can't just like go on autopilot because I feel like that's when you find yourself being one of those people who buys into a bad deal because you didn't do your own due diligence, and now you're one of those guys who's like trying to sell a property at a huge loss because you messed up when you bought in. You know what I mean? So
No,
uh,
I do. But the thing is,
yeah,
you've done the hard groundwork building up that muscle for that strategy. So it's
yeah, for
not
sure.
like starting from scratch. So it's less time intensive than learning a new strategy, implementing that new strategy. So I fully get that though. And if you're not going to be able to have that time and focus to effectively learn that strategy and hit the ground running, then either, like you mentioned, partner up with someone like on a junior level where you could sort of just
Hmm.
get the learning and be a little less active since you don't have the time, or just stick to your current strategy that doesn't require as much time as it did the first time, because you don't need to relearn the things that you currently already know. You're just building on top of that, right?
Oh, for sure. And I mean, so my second property I bought with a partner. It was my first time doing that, and I've kind of learned how to do that, if that makes sense. And like now both of these properties, they're both small multifamilies. One's with a partner, one I just own by myself. But they're both at the point where they're stabilized, right? And they're just the properties. I said I shouldn't run on autopilot, but my properties are running on autopilot right now, and it's a beautiful thing, right? So
It is.
it's
That's the goal.
so now that I know how to rinse and repeat that model, like I'm just looking to just keep doing it. So
I have a question for you.
sure.
So this, and I often get this from newer investors, is the market's not great right now. Interest rates are not great right now, or prices aren't great right now, or there's too much competition, or people are going in unconditional to get a great deal, or there aren't any great deals. Like there's always some reason, some excuse, something that's not ideal in the current market. And of course, seasoned investors know that there's always opportunity in every market, and they just adjust their strategies accordingly. But when you got started, what broke your fear or your excuses for not taking action? Because there's always enough excuses not to take action. There's always a reason to wait for more ideal circumstances or a more ideal market to jump into. How did you get over that? Did you experience that at all, where you're like, interest rates aren't as high, or prices, or it's a little too competitive, let's just wait a little longer, and then stop yourself from doing that?
Yeah. So I wish I could give credit to where I got this from, but it was from a podcast. They said, I mean, there's a couple different thoughts. One was just that, like, a lot of millionaires are made during recessions, right? Just
Yeah.
when everything's falling apart, you have a savvy business person, a savvy investor, rather than running away and being fearful of the market conditions. They like keep their powder dry. They hold their capital ready for an opportunity, and then they see it and they take it. Right? They're not scared that
Yeah.
the market's bad. There's I also heard this is later, so I'm applying a later thought to something I kind of thought intuitively at the time. But I heard when I was I did a coaching program, and they said it's always a good time to buy a good deal, and it's always a bad time to buy a bad deal, right? So like you take the market conditions,
Hmm.
and so if if it's a bad market, you are still just looking for a good deal. If that means you have to analyze 1,000 instead of 100, that's fine. You're still just waiting for the good deal. And then when you see, you take it. But it's the same
Yes.
when it's a good market, right? Because it's like piranhas. It's a feeding frenzy when it's a hot market. And I mean, a lot of the people that I've been negotiating properties with right now are those people who bought into the market at that time, and they bought bad deals in a good market, right? So
Yep.
you
Yeah.
can get yourself into trouble in any market. You just have to know what you're looking for and like know that it's a good deal. So this is why I put so much effort into learning how to analyze properly is it's like, yeah, so yes, interest rates are high, but when I run the pro forma at a 5.5 or a 6 or a 6.5% interest rate, if the deal works, it works, right? And then there's almost like a
Yeah.
little bit of built-in like future prosperity there, because, well, hopefully we'll see what the interest rates do, right? But like if I'm running, and often I'll, whatever the market is right now, I'll add an extra 0.5% or 0.75% onto the interest rate, just in case, just to build some in. And then suppose I sit on that interest rate, like suppose the deal works and I buy the place, and at that interest rate it works, and then 3 years from now the interest rate comes down 1% or 2%. Like now that property's killing it, right? And now I'm super happy that I bought in when I did. So if the deal works, it works, no matter what the market's doing, right? So yeah, it's just the avoidance of FOMO, right? Like whether the market is good or bad, if everybody's like, you should be doing this, and you just jump in without thinking, like you're just acting on FOMO. Like you have to kind of be comfortable and confident with what you're doing. So, which, like I said, I jumped in early. I didn't know everything, which is why I relied on the people around me, and like you said, a very good team. And it's also why I got into coaching later on, because a lot of the podcasts I listen to, like some of them, like they do their speed round at the end or whatever and ask the same questions. And, a lot of them are like, what do you wish you knew 30 years ago or 20 years ago? And a lot of them said, I wish I got into coaching earlier. Right. So I was like 6 months into my journey, and I was like, hey, I'll do that right now. I'll get right out. Like I won't be that person who waited 30 years to do it. So I started looking into it, and of course it's insanely expensive. So I was like, maybe not. maybe now's not the right time. But I found a program here in Edmonton that was very like reasonably priced and had a great crew of instructors, of coaches. I said that weird, but yeah. So I got into it, and they taught me a lot, and I learned a lot through that program. So it was good. This is like worthwhile things to do to make sure like you're comfortable with what you're doing. You know what I mean? Like if you keep building up your own professional development and personal development so that you're always learning and you're getting better at this, like you're never going to regret doing that.
Yeah, 100%. It's a constant journey, and you constantly leveling up. And I mean, I feel like you've done a great job at it, because some people feel like, okay, well, if I can't fork out like 10,000, 20,000, whatever the coaching costs, if I can't fork that out right now, well, let's just push that down the line. I can't get into it, or I don't have enough money or enough experience or whatever. There's so many excuses, but you start learning a little bit, you start building your power team, you start networking, and then you started taking action. And now you got to a point like, okay, I can go ahead and level up my education. And you constantly leveling up. You're constantly leveling up the people you're networking with. You're leveling up your forms of education and learning. You're leveling up your form of investing, and it gets bigger and bigger, and it gets more sophisticated over time.
And hopefully that's the idea.
Exactly, that's the goal, and that's what we're working towards, right? That first deal doesn't have to be the perfect deal. But I do like the fact that you highlighted not being emotional when going into this, because if you have FOMO, you're right, you can easily get into a bad deal. And as much as real estate can be a good form to build in your wealth, it can also be a good way to lose any wealth that you have built up anyway. So you need to come from I want to say like a strategic form of thinking and not be emotional at all. So one thing that I do for my investors is when we're running the numbers and we look at a deal, we're like, okay, this deal looks like we can make it work. Is what numbers, what does it make sense before we even go into the negotiation? What's our cutoff point where, like, if it goes above this number, we're walking away. Let's know that cutoff point now before we get invested in the negotiation and things maybe get emotional, right?
Yeah.
So this is the cutoff point. What's the ideal number? Like, what are we targeting? Okay, so we're targeting that number. Well, based on that number, where do we start the negotiation? And then we have 3 sets of numbers: our starting point, our target, and then our cutoff point. And I like getting this before get all 3. Let's get all 3 out while we all calm and strategic and we know what that looks like. And then if the deal doesn't work, it doesn't work. The last thing you want to do is get into something all emotionally and you're trying to force the deal to work, and you make potentially a deal that could have been good if you got it at the right numbers, and now not be a good deal, and then you buy too high, and you're stuck in a situation where the market was good but you didn't get a good deal like you mentioned, and now the market's bad and that deal is like terrible, and now you end up having to I don't know, fork out, you know what I mean? If you want to sell, fork out on the close kind of thing. So honestly, this happens all the time. And yeah, you're right. Like in any market, there's good deals and there's bad deals. And but honestly, Mitch, I'm more just impressed by the fact that you started and you've taken action and you've repeated it and you've done it in such a short time frame. When was the how long ago was that first deal from today?
It was July of last year. So whatever
So
that
it's
is, like,
just over
you
a
know,
year now, like
a
what
year and
almost
three
a year
months
and
or
a
something like
half,
that.
almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you've got 2 deals and you're on the hunt for your third deal right now. That's super
Yes.
impressive.
Yeah.
Now tell me, there must have been lessons that you've learned from your failures along the way, because no one takes action without any failure. And the biggest reason for people not taking action is the fear of failure. Now you have to let go of that, right? Because failure is the only way that you learn and the only way that you actually progress. But have there been any failures that you've learned from, and how have they shaped your approach and in action that you're now taking?
Yeah, it's a good question. I honestly think that people learn just as much or more from any failures and success. So I think I've been pretty lucky so far not to have anything that I would call a failure. There's been a ton of things
Lessons
that I've
learned.
learned. Yeah, oh yeah, there's so many things that I've learned, right? Like on the first property, I mean, I got a really good deal on it because it needed a reasonable amount of work. Um, and like one of the things that I've just kind of learned about how to approach that is I in fixing those things, I went like really overboard on some of them, and like, oh man, like those. This was something I like one of my mentors mentioned to me just before this, and then I just got too into it. I think I was too excited, and I just wanted to fix everything, and I spent a lot of money on fixing it. Right, and like this was not meant to be a flip. Like nothing like that. It was just I spent quite a bit more money than I should have. So I mean, I already applied that to my second property, and I'm trying to be a little bit more measured in my not just repairs. Like repairs have to be done, right? Like there's nothing to no way around that. But just being a little bit more measured in that. And then I've learned a lot about tenant selection. Tenant selection, my God, it's so important. So
Oh yeah.
at one of my properties, I've already had a full turnover. I was renting by the room in the upstairs suite, so I had 5 separate tenants in this one house, and I had a full turnover upstairs. So I had the chance. I placed all 3 of the tenants myself upstairs. Had some challenges, a lot of challenges, and then they all moved out based on the previous plan. There was only supposed to be a 6-month lease. It's not like it got so bad that they left or I had to kick them out, but I just learned a lot of lessons about like the kind of people I want to be working with, because it's like these tenants live here, but there's also a long-term relationship with these people. We have to get along. We have to be able to communicate to each other. Like, you know what I mean? We have to be able to resolve conflicts like grown-ups. I just learned a lot about picking the right people. And so I have a new round of tenants in there now, and another new one in the basement, one of the basement suites. And I think because I learned those lessons, things are going much smoother. You know what I mean? Like I
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
legitimately enjoy dealing with these people. I like
Yeah.
talking with them. I see them
Yeah.
calling me, and I'm not like, oh boy, what is it this time? You know what I mean? So it makes such a difference. Like good tenant selection. And then just like a
Oh,
few other things
yeah.
as well, like automating your processes and stuff like that, so you don't get pulled into the weeds on every little thing, and not being scared to outsource things. Like at the beginning, so I'm not a handyman. In my own house that I live in, while I've lived here, I've been pretty gung ho. Like, I'm a grown man. I'm going to fix everything with my house as it comes up. If it's doesn't require an electrician or something like that. And any job I've had to do, this hasn't happened so much since I had kids because I can't, but like I had to replace the outdoor water shutoff. It took me like 9 hours. I had to go back to Home Depot like 4 times. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, it was like,
Yeah.
hell yeah, I
Yeah.
fixed that thing by myself and I learned a lot and whatever. But now that it's more of a business for me, like I can't do that. So I did that for the first few months, and I wasted a lot of time, and I consider my time to be worth something. So I don't consider that to be free. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
yeah, after a while, I was like, "What am I doing? Like, I'm a busy person. This is not worth my time." So I just had to like relearn, I guess, that it's worth outsourcing to people to do these jobs that either I don't want to do or I'm just not as good at. You know what I mean? So yeah, these are, and don't get me wrong, I have like 100 lessons learned. I have a note on my phone. Every time something comes up, I open the note and I put it in, and I have categories under like like purchase negotiations and tenant selection. I have like pages of notes because it it's not embarrassing to me to have to learn a lesson, something that I didn't know before. But I'm embarrassed of myself if I have to relearn the same lesson several times. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
I have no excuse.
Oh man,
So
that
yeah,
mic drop, man. I love that. I love that. That is so true. Like you shouldn't be scared or embarrassed to learn lessons, right? It's only if you're doing that twice. If you're making that mistake again, then that's on you. And I love that hack. Like take out your phone, take a note, have like some sort of a system, and it also you'll retain it better. Even if you never went back to read it, just by not just thinking about it, but physically like typing it, writing it out. Like I feel like you know it just helps retain it and filing it away. But man, you touched over quite a bit there, and I just want to highlight that. Like when it comes to like rental properties, the tenant profile, tenant screening, two of the most important things. If you can front load most of your efforts to that, like the rest of it just becomes a whole lot easier, right? If you get a good tenant in a property, the management of that becomes a whole lot easier. So putting more effort into the screening of your tenants just can make the whole experience as a landlord and as an investor managing your rental properties easier. One other thing though is, so you're renting it out by the room. Now I know this is more management intensive, but also is a nice way to increase your rental income, especially in a market
definitely.
where properties don't cash flow, right? If you rent it by the room, you collect more money. Again, more time intensive, more management intensive, because instead of dealing with a one tenant, you're dealing with like potentially 5 tenants. I know some people have a different way of structuring it. Like maybe they rent it out to students, and you know they lease into one student who kind of collects the rent from everyone else, all her other friends or his or her other friends, and does it that way. But it's still more intensive than dealing with one family, right? And just collecting one check from everyone. But yeah, definitely. I just wanted to highlight that. Going forward, speaking about like the outsourcing and treating this as a business, I feel like that there is something that we shouldn't just brush over, because that is an important lesson that a lot of people end up learning the hard way. Man, I know personally myself is like there's so I have to tell myself constantly, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. I'm always telling myself that, because I'm like, I can do this. Like I can do almost anything I want to do. I mean, I know that I have limitations, but I'm like, I can do this. If I put the time into learning, I can do it. But I'm like, should I be doing this? Is this the best use of my time? Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should be doing it. And oftentimes I've sort of started something and then I've had to backtrack and be like, nope, outsource that, you know?
Yeah.
Outsource that, because you need to think of the ROI on your time. Like your time is worth something. And when you first getting started, it's worth less, of course, but you need to value your time and treat this like a business, because if you don't treat it like a business, you're never going to make money. You're never going to be able to scale. You're going to stay with one or two. You can't make a business out of it unless you treat it like a business. And all businesses have role specialization. They have people who perform specific tasks. And when you build in this, you build in a team, you build in a business. The nice thing about this is a lot of your primary initial power team members come at zero cost to you, right? You're not paying your realtor to go out and find deals for you. You know, you're not paying your mortgage broker, especially on the residential side. I mean, it's a little different on the commercial side, but you know, a lot of these key members, come at zero cost when you first get started, and then you build on top of that. But man, I just love the fact that you highlighted that, because it's super important. If you thought, okay, I can spend some time fixing up stuff at my properties, or I could take that same amount of time, especially if I have a demanding job that takes a lot of time and I have a family, I can take that same amount of time. And if I put that into finding another deal, would that be worth more than saving the money that I would have spent getting someone to fix this on one of my properties? You know what I mean? And thinking and seeing things through that lens is like, well, what makes more sense? And I mean, to each their own. Like everyone has their own goals. I want to be a handyman and I only want one property or 2 properties to retire from. And, that's the goal. Well, that's fine. Then, you don't want to scale up. There's nothing wrong with that. But depending on the goal, you need to treat it like a business if you want to scale. So I love that. Thank you for highlighting that, man. I have another question for you, and this has to do with, this is going back to running your numbers. So you got started, you started building up your power team, you started running your numbers, and you started viewing properties, and you took action from there. Did you experience analysis paralysis at all? Because that is one of the biggest things that newer investors experience, right? And a lot of them can't overcome that. So did you experience it? And if so, how were you able to overcome that?
Maybe a little bit at some point, especially as you get a little bit better at analyzing the deals. It kind of becomes fun, right? Like I said earlier, I analyzed like hundreds of properties, and I'd find myself sitting here like sometimes late into the evening or into the night, just analyzing properties because I was like legitimately enjoying it. I was getting better and learning about Edmonton and different properties, and as you do these pro formas, it's not just about putting the numbers in. That takes no time at all, but learning. It's like garbage in, garbage out. Like if you don't have the right numbers, your inputs are bad, your outputs can be bad too. So I was doing research into like market rents and average property taxes in different areas and like all this kind of stuff, as well as like I was starting to read zoning bylaws and stuff like that, you know what I mean? And like really getting into the weeds on some of it, which I really enjoyed. But then sometimes I'd find myself like, okay, like what have I accomplished in analyzing 30 properties tonight? What I need to do is like, let's categorize those into like bad, meh, and good, right? And then take the good ones and I'll forward them to Devin and I'll say, these are the ones I want to look at. What are the realtor comments on them? Like, are they available? Like, let's book a viewing. Or if I'm like, this one's going to go fast, let's just shoot over an offer right now. And I got to that point because there were several nights where I went to bed after like 4 hours sitting at my computer analyzing deals, which was like, it went fast, I enjoyed it. But then I'd go to bed and I'd be like, yeah, analyzed all those deals. Good job. But like, now what? Like, it wasn't just for the practice. It was to accomplish something. So I had to like remind myself, like, what am I doing with the analyses that I'm doing here? So yeah, so I'd like have to remind myself to keep moving forward with the analysis side, So I don't know if that's so much paralysis, so much as, I don't know, going very far down the rabbit hole before realizing that I was so far down. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if that's if that makes sense or not, but
it does. And I think that's honestly what it comes down to is you start analyzing and then you start going down the rabbit hole and you don't take action. Because that's the whole paralysis of it, right? Is you're analyzing and you never get out of analyzing. You just go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into it, but you don't take action. It never results in any action. So I like the fact that you highlighted that. And honestly, what I found is another big one is this depends on your strategy, of course, right? So for some people, it's not an issue, but rents you could figure out. I mean, for some people, they still have the doubt on the rental side, but the biggest one I find by far is the renovation costs, because this one can vary drastically. Like rents, you go to Rent Faster, you go to Facebook Marketplace, Door Inside. There's a few sites, and you can try and look at like rental comparables based on the property that you're looking at. Look at the pictures. What's the average looking like? Let's be conservative. You could do that, but when it comes to the renovation costs, it's tough because you just don't know. And you could even get a couple of quotes or speak to a couple of people on what the rehab cost looks like, what their numbers are for running, and everyone has their own method for calculating this. Some have in depth by the square foot, others have like just rough percentages, and it's like, how do I know what's right? Like, it seems like there's a big variance for error here, you know what I mean? So I get that. And what I tell a lot of my investors is, let's run some rough numbers on those properties, and if it seems like it could work, once we negotiate and get it under contract, then we start getting contractors out, especially for out-of-province investors. This is a big one for them. And then we sort of get a few contractors out there. Get 3 contractors at least out there and get some quotes. And then you can sort of look at what the average is starting to look like. And then that gives you an idea. Most contractors won't come out if you don't even have the property under contract, because the property someone could put an offer in tomorrow and it could be gone.
For
right?
sure, yeah.
If it's under contract while you have conditions and you can still pull out of the deal, you can then get a better idea on what that looks like. But by far, that was the biggest one I found, was the rehab side. A lot of unknowns on that. But I like that advice though, and I like the fact that you held yourself accountable. Like, I'm spending all this time analyzing, something needs to come from it. It's fun doing it, but I'm not just doing it for fun. Like there's a
there needs
reason
to be
why
an
I'm doing this.
outcome. Yeah.
I need to get to the other side of it. So I like that. It keeps you in check. Mitch, one thing I'm excited to dive into is, and it's honestly, it's like one of my favorite part of the show. It's what I call time capsule, right? So let's imagine for a second, you've stumbled across a time machine that allows you to travel back and forth in time. You can't change anything, but you can give and receive advice from your younger or older self. So first, let's go back to when you were 18 years old, which I'm sure it wasn't too long ago. What advice would you give your younger self with the knowledge you have now? Now, this can be within business, it can be investing, personal life, familial, general. It really doesn't matter. It can be a combination of them all. What advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
There's like a big picture one and a little picture one. The little picture one would be the book that your landlord is going to give you in a couple of years. Read it as soon as she gives it to you. Because then you could start your journey a little bit earlier. But the big picture one is just like, I don't know. I think I had the right mindset back then. Like I was all about, when I was 18, I was all about just like doing new things, exploring the world, having new experiences. And I mean, when you're young, you have to do that stuff. So I'd say keep doing what you're doing, man. But yeah, get into real estate sooner.
I love that. And I honestly, I'm eager to know how many investors Robert Kiyosaki has made himself, because that's almost like the Bible for real estate investing. It's like the book. If you had to ask majority of investors, what got you started? What was that book? For most people, I'd say for the vast majority, it would probably be Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki.
Yeah, it's huge.
That's it.
And right? I hesitated to mention it at the beginning of this because it's so cliche, you know what I mean? But
it is.
It is what it is.
But if it did the job, then I mean, give it its credit.
Yeah.
Now, looking ahead to your 80th birthday, what advice do you imagine your future self would offer your present self at your current age?
I can only imagine it'll be like what I hear my elders telling me now, and it's like, don't wish away your time. Don't pass up on time spent with family and friends. You know what I mean? It's not always clear in the moment, but the things you think are important aren't always important. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's important to stop and take stock of what is important in your life at any given moment, or what you think it'll be in 10 years, right? And to be working towards that and prioritizing that at all times. So I think it would be that. I remember reading something. They did not like a study, but almost like it was like an artwork. They interviewed a lot of people who were on their deathbed, and it was like, what would you tell younger people, or what's your biggest regret? And it's like not spending more time with my family. It's that I spent the whole time, trying to run my business or something like that, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like the things that are important are your friends and family. It's your relationships, right? So like time is exceptionally important to me. It's a very valuable resource, but it's a means. Like what am I trying to do with my time? Why is it important? It's to spend time with people and like doing things with people I care about, right? So I think that's what my 80-year-old self would say to myself. And I tried to live by that. Hopefully I could say to my 80-year-old self, like, thanks, Gramps, I'm doing that.
But it's true, man. And I feel like for a lot of investors, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people who are really driven to push themselves to better their lifestyle, better their family's lifestyle, it's easy to lose sight of that and be caught in the hustle, in the grind,
for sure,
in the pursuit of the goal. And have that laser focus, which is good. That laser focus is what gets you the results, but have it to the point that you neglect your present and all the blessings that they offer you to soak up in the present, right? And then look back years from now and be like, I didn't take full advantage of that. So I get that. I relate to that all day, every day, brother. It's like, you need a combination of them both. You need a counterbalance of them both. It's like, gotta achieve and you gotta push, and then you also just gotta enjoy the present as well.
Stop and enjoy where you are. Right? It's a little bit of like grass is always greener, but I find people and myself, I'm same as anybody else. Like I'll find myself wishing or like really looking forward to a point in my life where something else has happened. You know what I mean? Like sometimes my wife and I will be like, we look forward to when our kids are a little bit older and aren't quite so dependent. You know what I mean? And then we stop and we're like, wait a second, like they're at a very cute age right now. We should enjoy every minute. Yes, it's hard. It's exhausting. We're just always exhausted, but like we should not wish away this time. We will never get it back. Right.
Oh yeah.
And I've heard from so many people older than me that like as you get older, time just goes faster, right? All of a sudden, like I have grandparents who are 70s, 80s right now, and they're like, "How the hell did I get here? Like I'm so old all of a sudden, right?" And there's a guy I work with who I don't know how old he is, but he described it. We were talking about something kind of similar to this. We described it kind of like a standard car, like a standard transmission. Like you start out in first, and then with every decade of your life, you shift into the next gear. And like the mechanics of it, you're just shifting the same thing. You're doing the same thing. But as you're doing that, you're going faster and faster. And all of a sudden you find yourself in sixth gear and you're like, Jesus, I'm going fast, And like, this is how he was describing time in his life. He's like, it goes fast. And before you know it, it's all gone. So don't ever waste
end of the road.
So, yeah. Exactly.
No, exactly, man.
And you never know when it's coming, right? So
100%. And you constantly looking back like, even with the kids, they were so cute when they were this small and they couldn't move there's always with every stage, there's always something to take in, right? And there's struggles with every stage of life as well. So, that's just how it is, man. But I think that is a truthful, honest answer that I think we can all take. So we can all thank 80-year-old Mitch for that great advice. But Mitch, I want to thank you for coming on, brother. I will be sure to leave all your contact info down in the description below for anyone who's like, hey man, this Mitch guy sounds awesome. I want to follow along on his journey. I want to get to know him more. Maybe they want to reach out to you and bug you for advice or something. I have no idea, but I'm going to leave that down there.
One of my favorite things through all this has been like investor coffees and like learning from other people.
Man.
So I'm totally, I'll chat with anybody. I love learning other people's experiences. And there's been a few times where I've talked to somebody who's just starting. They're on day one of their journey. And to them, it seems like I've been doing it for a while. And I really haven't, but I have some things to say, right? So I love talking to people. I love learning from other people. So yeah, feel free to contact me.
Perfect, brother. I'll leave that in there. And honestly, that's what people will find is the investor community is so supportive. But man, I want to thank you for coming on. Like you said, you have a busy schedule. So I know people found value from this one, especially investors looking to get started. So really want to thank you, brother. It's been a pleasure,
awesome,
man.
Yeah, thanks, Elray. Appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to Building Wealth Through Real Estate. If you're interested in learning how to grow a brand, dominate social media, start a business, as well as all things real estate investing, then you absolutely want to check out my interview with Milena Simsek. This is your host, Elray Noble, signing off.